Welcome back to the lecture series on Python programming specialization. In the last few videos, we have seen what are variables, constants and the literals in Python main. In this lecture, we'll see what data types are and what are the various data types that are supported by Python. The agenda of this lecture is we'll see what are data types and then what are the special properties of the Python data types and what are the various data types that are supported by Python. Like Python supports data types to store the scalar data, sequence data, mapping data and also the set data also. So we'll see all the details related to the data types that are supported by Python. So let's try to understand what a data type means. Data type actually allows us to determine what is the type of value you can store in a variable or in an object. Moreover, it also allows us to understand what are the various operations that can be performed on an object or a variable. Consider this example, a equal to 10. So the value 10 is stored in a. So after knowing that the object a is belonging to an integer type, I can understand that an integer type value is stored in the variable a, and moreover I can even understand that it is possible to perform all the arithmetic, bitwise and the relational operators on the variable a, right? Whereas consider this example, s equal to Python. So when I know that s is of string data type, then I can understand that s is having a string type of data. And moreover, I can understand that it is not valid to perform the arithmetic operations on this variable s. So that is how data types allows us to understand what is the type of value that is stored in a variable, and moreover, you can even understand what are the various operations that can be performed on the variables or the objects. So Python data types are very special, and now let's try to understand what are the various properties of Python data types. So Python data types are dynamic. That means you need not to declare the variables in advance to say that the variable is belonging to this specific type. So it's not required, whereas other languages like C, C++, Java, they require that you need to declare the variables before their usage. That is, the variables are bounded to that data type itself. But whereas in case of Python, so depending on the value you are storing in the variable, the data type of a variable will be decided in Python. So for example, here you consider a equal to 10. Here an integer value is stored in the variable a. Then a is treated as an integer type, whereas b is assigned with a value of 10.3, right? So here 10.3 is assigned to the variable b. Then b is considered as a floating point type. And consider this example, c is assigned with a string type. Then Python will consider the c as a string type, as you are storing a string data type, whereas d is assigned with a collection of elements, and which indicates that d is a list. That is how, depending on the value that is stored in the variables, Python treats the type. So here a is considered as an integer because you are storing an integer value, and b is considered as a float because you are storing a floating point type. Nowhere you are declaring the type of the variables. So unlike the other languages, Python does not require any pre-declaration of the variables. That's how Python is a dynamically typed language. Another interesting property of Python is the data type of a variable can be changed during the execution time. Consider this example, x equal to 5. Here initially I am assigning an integer value to the variable x. So x is treated as an integer. At later point of time, so I am assigning a floating point value to x. Now x is treated as a floating point type because you are assigning a floating point type to the variable x. Then at later point of time, again I am changing the value that is stored in x. So I am assigning a string to the variable x. Now onwards x will be treated as a string type. So later point of time, I am again changing its value by assigning the tuple type, a collection of elements. Then here onwards x will be treated as tuple. So here if you observe, initially the variable x is treated as an integer because you are storing an integer value, and later you change that to floating, then later you change that to a string, then at later point of time you change that to tuple. So that's how the type of the variable need not to be fixed to one type. So it can be changed also during the execution of the program. In other languages like C, C++, Java, so this kind of changing of type of variable is not valid. Here you need to remember one thing. Here x is belonging to an integer at some point in time, later it's belonging to the float type, and later string, later it's of type tuple. But at no point in time the variable is belonging to more than one type. So a variable in Python either can be belonging to an integer type or float type or the string type or tuple type, but not more than one type. Another interesting property of Python data types is every item of data in Python is treated as an object, whereas every data type in Python is treated as a class, and moreover a variable in Python is treated as an instance of the class. If you consider this example here, a equal to 100. So you are treating a as an integer by storing an integer value to the variable a. Then what happens is, actually here 100 is an object, an integer type object, and by assigning you are giving a name to the object. Right here I am giving a name a to the object 100. Here you can consider the variable a as an instance of the integer class. That's how every variable in Python is an instance of the class. So depending on whether the language is allowing unwanted changes in the type conversions or not, languages can be either considered as weakly typed languages or strongly typed languages. So Python is strongly typed language. So in case of the weakly typed languages, so what happens is the languages, the compiler or the interpreter allows unwanted changes in the type of the variables. For example, hello plus 5. So in some languages this statement is valid. What happens here is hello is appended with 5 and the resultant hello 5 will be returned, which is an unwanted change. So such kind of conversions are not valid in case of Python, because Python is a strongly typed language, as Python does not allow any kind of unwanted changes in the variable types. A string and an integer concatenation is not valid in case of Python. So let's try to summarize the properties of the Python data types. So Python is a dynamically typed language because it allows us to use the variables directly without any initialization. Then the type of the variable in Python can be changed during the execution time. So initially it can be of integer, later it can store a floating point type, they even be changed to the string type. That's how you can change the type of the variable during the execution time. So moreover, Python data types are the classes, whereas variables are the instances of these classes. So another interesting property of Python data types is Python is a strongly typed language. That is, unwanted changes in the type of variables is not allowed in case of Python. So now we understand what data types are and what are the special properties of Python data types. Now given a variable, how do I understand that? So to which type the variable is belonging to? So Python provides a special method, the type method, to understand given the variable or the value, to what type the variable or the value is belonging to. So for example, I have a variable a which is assigned with the integer value 100. Then when I pass that variable a to the type method, it returns the class int. That means that, so Python is saying that the variable a is holding an integer type of value. So that's how you can understand the type of the variable or the value in Python. So now let's see what are the extensive list of data types that are supported by Python. Actually, Python supports numerous data types to store variety of data. So now let's see what are the extensive list of data types that are supported by Python. Actually, Python supports all these varieties of data types to support storing of variety of data. You can store scalar data in Python by using either int, float, complex or the Boolean types. So you can store a single value by using these types, whereas all the rest of the types, they are the collection data types. They allow you to store the collection of elements. So whereas in case of the list, tuple and the string, they allow you to store the sequential data. So where the order in the data elements is preserved. Whereas in case of the dictionary, so the dictionary data type allows you to store implicit mapping in the data. And Python also supports us to store unordered collection of elements by providing the set and the frozen set data types. So that's how Python supports enormous number of data types to store varieties of data. So far in this lecture, we understand what data types are, what are the special properties of Python data types, and moreover, what are the various data types that are supported by Python. Thank you for watching this video.